Hello, welcome to Finance Hub. I'm Hilda. Happy New Year 2021, and I hope that this year will be a beautiful one for you. A new year gives us an opportunity to start all over again, to make adjustments and to live a better life. Today, I'll be sharing with you on how to start the year correctly regarding your finances. Stay tuned. So hi, today I'll be talking about budgeting. In my very first video on this channel, I did talk about budgeting. However, because it is the beginning of the year, I still want to talk about budgeting and emergency fund, and I'll be showing you a draft of my personal monthly budget. Now, why is a budget so important? What is a budget? A budget is a plan on how to spend the money you have or the money you are sure to get. Now, it is not a plan on how to spend money you are hoping to get or you're wishing someone would offer you, but it's a plan on how to spend the money you are sure you will get or you have already. So this could be your allowance and this could be your monthly salary. Now, why is a budget so important? A budget is so important because when money comes to you, you are going to spend it anyways, but you want to make the most out of the money you have. You want to get the most value of the money that comes to your hands. You want to be a good steward of the money that comes to you. Now, Dave Ramsey, a very prominent financial expert, recommends a zero-based budget. A zero-based budget is a budget in which your income and your expenses balance out. That means after you have deducted your expenses from your income, the balance should be zero. Now, this is so important and good because it helps you account for every penny that comes into your hands. Now, talking about emergency funds, in a bit I'm going to show you the components of my budget, but I just want to touch on an emergency fund. An emergency fund is money that you keep aside for rainy days. It's money that you put aside to use when an event suddenly occurs and at that time you do not have the money you require to spend on that event. It could be maybe a sickness, it could be the loss of a job, or it could be something that suddenly happens and you need money to use for that event. Now, if 2020 taught us anything, it is the fact that we cannot always determine what will happen and we do not have control over the circumstances around us. Of course, we can and should have control over our own lives, but then we cannot always control what happens externally, and what happens externally has an effect on us. And if we do not plan to protect ourselves, then the events that happen around us could impact us negatively. In 2020, many people were negatively affected, but of course, we learned about people like Elon Musk and Jeff Bezos that had the best year of their lives during the pandemic. But that is because they had put systems in place that helped them to make money while others were losing the money. So we can equally protect ourselves. And I want to take you into the Bible. If you're not a Christian, you are definitely still going to learn from what I'm about to share. But I would like to show you what the Bible talks about protecting yourself from protecting yourself against negative events. Proverbs chapter 22 verse 3 says, "A prudent man foreseeth the evil and hideth himself, but the simple pass on and are punished." The prudent man is a wise man, is a diligent man. He foresees the evil and he does what? He hides himself. But the foolish man passes on and is punished. Now, back again into the Bible, we know about the story of Joseph. If you're a Christian, you probably have heard about how Joseph preserved the nation of Egypt. Now, Pharaoh So Pharaoh had a dream in which he saw 7 healthy, well-fed cows, and as he was looking at these 7 healthy, well-fed cows, 7 other thin, malnourished cows showed up and ate up these 7 healthy ones. And after eating the 7 healthy ones, it seemed as though they had not eaten anything, and Pharaoh was disturbed. He had never seen these kind of cows before, and that was how Joseph was brought in to interpret these dreams. And Joseph explained that the 7 healthy cows represented 7 years of plenty, and the 7 thin cows represented 7 years of famine. And these years of famine were going to be so bad that the 7 years of plenty were going to look insignificant. But what was most important wasn't the interpretation that Joseph gave to the dream, but the advice that he gave Pharaoh. And the advice was for Pharaoh to save food in the years of plenty, for the years of famine. And we know that during the years of famine, Egypt had so much food that the surrounding countries came to buy food from Egypt, and that was how Joseph reunited with his family. So this is how Pharaoh and Joseph were able to hide themselves from the evil. The 7 years of famine, in this case, was the evil, and the fact that they put aside some food for these 7 years was how they hid themselves. But the Bible says that the foolish pass on and are punished. The surrounding countries maybe did not have this revelation, and therefore they had no food in store, and many of them didn't have food to eat. And imagine if you had no money, how are you going to get food even from Egypt? So that is what an emergency fund does for us. And an emergency fund helps us to have money to spend at the time when we need it the most. You do not need to have a monthly salary or allowance of $1,000 to start putting aside an emergency fund. Start with what you have. Just set some money aside. The most important thing is to discipline yourself not to use this money on things that are not important. Do not use this money for parties. Do not use this money at the slightest opportunity that comes up for you to use money. If that thing you want to spend money on can wait, then you shouldn't touch your emergency funds, because guess what? There's going to be a rainy day and you will absolutely need this money. Before now, I've also talked about the 50-30-20 rule. Now, the 50-30-20 rule states that we spend 50% of our income on our needs, things that we absolutely need for survival, 30% on our wants, those are things that we can do without, and 20% on our savings. But I also mentioned that you could switch up these percentages, and by that I don't mean that you should increase how much you spend on needs and wants, but you can switch up the percentages so that you have more money for your investments and your savings. So I'm going to take you right now into my budget. I'll be showing you a draft. So here's what the draft of my budget looks like. I transferred this same draft into an Excel sheet so that it would be easy for me to record my expenses for every month. So this one does not have my actual figures, but be rest assured it is the budget, the structure of the budget I'm currently using. So right here you can see budget, and under that you can see income after tithe. I'm a Christian, okay, so I intend to pay my tithe, and I budget on my income after I have paid my tithe. And the first category on that budget is needs. Now if you just below that, you'd see item, budget, and actual. Let me quickly take you through the items under needs. There I have rent, I have food, I have electricity, water, gas, internet, insurance, telephone. Okay, and this middle column shows budget. So this is here I put the money that I have budgeted for each item. I have a budget for rent. Of course, that does not really change unless they decide to increase or decrease my rent, but of course they'll always tell me way ahead of time. I also have a budget for my food. I have a budget for electricity, water, gas, internet, insurance, and telephone. Now this budget helps me to control how much I spend on each item. The last column shows actual. It means actual expenditure. If I budgeted $300, for example, for food, that is, I'm going to put $300 here. But actual, what did I spend at the end of the month after 30 days? How much did I spend on food? I'll record that here. If I spent below budget, let's say maybe $270, I'm going to write that here. If I spent maybe $320, I'm going to write that here. Okay, so at the end of it all, down here I put a total. Let me quickly just add that one. So I put a total for budget, I put a total for actual. Now so my needs takes up about 50% of my income. Okay, and the next category is savings and investments. Still, I have my 3 columns: item, budget, and actual. Under my savings and investment, I have emergency fund and I have investment. Actually, I'm still building my emergency fund. So every month in this year, I'm going to ensure that I add to my emergency fund. There is no problem having an emergency fund that is above 6 months. So just make sure that every month you set aside some money for that. And the next thing, I have investment. It is not very advisable that you keep your money at the bank. The reason is banks usually offer very low interest, and in some cases, like where I live, banks really don't give you any interest on your money. So if at the beginning of the year you had $1,000 in your bank account, that is the same amount you're going to have after 12 months. But if you put that money into some investment, you're going to make some extra cash at the end of the year. So it's not enough for you to save. It is most important that you invest. All right, but while you're investing, make sure that you're actually putting a lot more into your emergency fund. So the last category on my budget is givings and wants. The first item under that category is partnership, right here. I'm a Christian, and it's important to me that the gospel goes around the world. So I partner with the gospel. It could be to distribute Bibles, to have the gospel preached on TV, or to help children, the underprivileged around the world. So I do that. That goes under partnership, and it's important to me that every month I put some money into that. And of course, I go to church and I'll have to give an offering, so that's very important. I also make sure that I budget that. And I have donations. So if I gave someone a cash gift, I would record that here. If I bought a gift for someone, I'm going to record that under donations. And shopping. If you know me, you know I love to shop. Every month I buy something for myself. It doesn't matter how little it is, but I like shoes, I like bags, I like clothes. Okay, so that's very important to me that I budget, and I have some money allocated just for this. And so that marks the end of my budget. At the end of it all, what I do is I sum up the actual. Like I told you before, if you sum up the budget column for all these categories, they are going to equal my income after tax. And for the actual, so at the end of the month, I sum up my actual column and I deduct the sum of that from my income after tithe. And the goal is it should be 0. If it's not 0, if it's negative, then I've gone beyond budget. If it's positive, that means I spent less than I had budgeted, which is my goal for every month anyways. So that is what I do, and I always try my best to ensure that I spend less than I had budgeted if it's possible, of course, if it's possible. But I try to do that. And if I spend less than I had budgeted, then I'm going to come right here and add that money to my emergency fund, or I may just leave it in my bank account as some loose cash and carry it over to the next month. But there is something that I introduced this year. At the beginning of the year, I wrote down my desired income, that is money that I wanted to be making monthly in this year. So I had a figure for that, and right here I put additional income needed. So what is my desired income? For example, if maybe I wanted to earn, let's say, $10,000 every month this year, I put that here. And additional income needed, that means desired income minus my current income after tax. Income after tax means my current income. All right, so this allows me to see how much money I need to make, and when I look at this amount right here, that helps me to strategize on how I can make more money. This is so important. I think that we can all have the lifestyle we want. If you put down a plan, then you can strategize and actually meet your goals. So this is basically how my monthly budget looks like. In the course of the year, I think I'm going to make some adjustments, but primarily this is how it's going to look like. And right now I have a figure here, and I'm strategizing on how to make this money, because if you know, I would like to increase money on my shopping, I want to increase money on my investments, and I want to increase money on my givings. At the moment, I don't intend to increase my needs, no, but these other two columns, I would really love to increase the money that I've allocated to them. So this is what my budget looks like. I hope it gives you an idea on how to make your own budget. You're free to use this, but I would like to know from you if you have your budget looks different, and please share with me. I would love to learn from you. But if you don't have one, you can start off with this, and I will update you as